It's 10 o'clock, so I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Mueller, representing Secretary Pollack here. Consistent with the governor's executive orders during our time of COVID-19, we're holding this meeting virtually. As you can see on the screen, all participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself so that we can know who we're calling on. And if you're an MPO member, please put MPO member in your name. I will conduct a roll call for all votes. When I start to call the roll, we will ask you all as members to raise your hand so we can find you and unmute you. Again, if you want to speak either as a member of the public or the MPO, please raise your hand and we will call on you. And I think that's it. So can we put up the agenda and call the roll, please? Oh, I'm sorry. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to fully participate in this meeting, please contact Kate White of the MPO staff at kwhite, that's WHITE, at chps.org, or call her at 857-702-3658. So there's the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is to call the roll. So could staff please call the roll?
Will do. MassDOT Chair.
This is David Mueller. I'm here.
MassDOT Representative number 2.
John Bishara,
John
you're here?
Bishara.
Thank you, John.
He is here, just having some difficulty with the unmuting.
John Bishara here.
Thank you. MassDOT Highway.
Here, John Romano here.
Okay, thank you. MBTA.
Not seeing anyone.
Not seeing anyone. Okay. Massport.
Hi there, this is Laura Gilmore with the Massachusetts Port Authority.
Thank you. MAPC.
Hello, Eric Barassa with MAPC.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board is here. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins with the Advisory Council here.
Thank you. City of Boston, BTD.
Here. President Tom Kazis.
Thank you, Tom. City of Boston, BPDA.
Hello, Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA representing Mayor Walsh, City of Boston.
Thank you, Jim. At-large City Everett.
Jay Monty representing Mayor DeMaria, City of Everett.
Thank you. At-large City Newton.
David Kozis, at-large City representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller and City of Newton.
Thank you, David. At-large Town Arlington.
Dina Lamstutz, Town of Arlington, at-large MPO member representing Select Board Chair John Hurd and MPO area towns.
Thank you. At-large Town Lexington.
Not seeing anyone.
Okay. Intercore Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, representing Mayor Joe Curtatone, City of Somerville in the Inner Core.
Thank you, Tom. Magic Acton.
Not seeing anyone.
Okay. Metro West Framingham.
Patrick Keyser, representing Mayor Spicer, Metro West.
Thank you, sir. North Shore Beverly.
Here, Darlene Wynn here for North
Thank-
Shore Beverly.
Thank you, Darlene. North Suburban Woburn.
Not seeing Tina.
Okay. South Shore Rockland.
Jennifer Constable, Town of Rockland, representing South Shore Coalition.
Thank you. Swap Medway.
Not seeing anyone.
And Trick Norwood, NRC.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trick subregion.
Okay, and I think I saw Samantha Silverberg come on from the MBTA.
Yep. Good morning, Samantha Silverberg, MBTA.
Morning, thank you. Our ex officio members, FHWA.
Ken Miller, Federal Highway Administration. Thank you.
Thank you. FTA. Okay, that calls the roll, Mr. Oh,
I do see that Sheila Page is here.
oh, at large town Lexington.
Yes, sorry about that. I am here.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. First item on the agenda is the chair's report. I don't have one at this time. So the next item is the executive director's report. Tegan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to just mention a couple of points related to outreach and communication. First, I hope that you've all, board members in particular, have seen the letters that I've been sending out. They look like they're for me. They are largely for me to MPO contacts. I've been working with staff to sort of frame these and send these communications about timely topics that are affecting our work. And I believe I've mentioned at least one of them before. But I just wanted to elevate it in your sort of awareness, just because the intent is to use these communications to elevate the visibility of the MPO and the work you as board members do, and that we as staff do to support you. So again, just kind of want to make sure you're aware of them and see them come through. And I always welcome any thoughts or reactions to them. One of them was about how we were continuing our work during the pandemic. Another was about acknowledging the violence against people of color and committing to our equity work. And then most recently this week, we sent a letter that was a call to stay focused on the MPO's long-term vision, even in time of pandemic, and the goals related to making the transportation system safe and sustainable and equitable. So again, I'm happy to chat with any of you if you have any comments or questions about them. The next item I wanted to talk about is, as you know, I believe that we'll cover a new set or another set of the TIP criteria revisions. And we've had to be pretty efficient in these conversations due to having full agendas. So I just want to emphasize the additional opportunities for forums and discussion outside of the MPO meeting coming up. We had one office hours, I believe it was last week, and we'll have another one coming up on Monday, July 20th at 1 p.m. As a reminder, this is for MPO board members only. So it's an opportunity for you all to be able to dive deeper into your questions and expand upon your input that you've provided to date, or reinforce input that you've provided to date. If you want to come to the Monday office hours at 1 o'clock, please register by tomorrow, Friday at noon, because we don't have anyone registered right now. And if no one is, then we'll cancel it. So let us know if you'd like to attend that. The other forum that we have coming up is a focus group where we'll focus on the point allocations. Again, MPO boards are focused. We sent out a poll asking for times you're available, and about 8 people have responded. But we just want to make sure everybody knows about it, is aware of it. And if you can respond about your availability by tomorrow at noon as well, we'll select a time tomorrow and announce it to the board and others. The third outreach communication item I wanted to mention is that we have a transit working group meeting coming up on Monday at 2:30. This is our second one. We had a longer break than we had hoped for between the first and the second. COVID-19 and other things take part in that. Our main topic this time will actually be talking with some folks at the MBTA and creating this forum between MBTA, service planning and policy making staff, and the transit service providers to talk about what the MPTA is doing in the COVID-19 pandemic, but also a bit beyond that to sort of enable that collaboration. We'll also be bringing up the MPO technical assistance for transit providers that we're offering right now, and then regular kind of coordination and updates. So there's a registration link, and it's on, if you go to the calendar, to the July 20th page, that link is there, and you can sign up there. We only have a couple of board members signed up to attend it so far, but also feel free to share it with your contacts and groups that you think it might be appropriate for. I believe we already have about 70 people signed up, so it should be a good, robust conversation. Okay, so today we have a very full agenda. We'll be talking about a work scope for feasibility study of repurposing a lane on Tobin Bridge. We're talking about the UPWP and hopefully endorsing it. There are a couple of tip amendments and the tip criteria revisions for capacity management and mobility, as I mentioned. Then finally, we do have MassDOT Highway Division back to us today, I believe, to provide updates and answer questions related to the project number 608611, the lighting improvements at I-93 and Route 24. Some folks joining the meeting may be interested in that. It was programmed in federal fiscal year 2020, but when approving Amendment 3 in April, the board voted to remove that project from the state funded TIP projects due to questions and concerns. So the Highway Division is back today to sort of talk to you all and give you updates on that project. So I look forward to that conversation. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan from the MPO members? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is public comment. If you have a comment you'd like to make at this time, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Also, as always, during the meeting, if you have a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Seeing no comments at this time, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Committee chairs reports. Are there any? Nope. So next one up is Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
David, I do see that Ben Muller has a comment.
Oh, Ben, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand raised, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to report that the UPWP committee met this morning and unanimously voted to recommend the draft FFY 2021 UPWP for MPO endorsement, agenda item 5 today. I'd like to note that this document came together during the beginning of the Stay at Home Advisory, and I'd like to note the appreciation of the committee for all the work required to pull this together at that time. In addition, there were the highest number of public comments that we've received on the UPWP in a while, thanks in part to the excellent work MPO staff performed in advertising a comment period. I look forward to MPO board discussion later this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And I share your appreciation of the staff's hard work.
We also have a comment from Olivia.
Okay, could you unmute Olivia? And please, for the record, Olivia, state your name. And if you have an affiliation you'd like to state, please state that.
Hello, good morning. My name is Olivia Nichols, and I'm the Transit Justice Organizer with Green Roots, a nonprofit organization in Chelsea. And today I'd just like to express that Green Roots is in support of the Tobin Bridge Managed Lanes feasibility study and requests that the study findings be presented to the Chelsea Transportation Task Force and other interested stakeholders. We're also asking that the study end with a Tobin Bridge southbound and northbound bus lane pilot program that commences no later than 2021. The 111 bus, which crosses the Tobin, is notorious in our community for the long waiting times riders experience while sitting in traffic on the way into Boston every morning. A bus lane on the Tobin would prioritize public transit and large numbers of transit-dependent riders in our community. Municipalities like Chelsea have already taken steps to implement bus lanes, the latest one being on Broadway in Chelsea. But we can't do this alone. And so a pilot program on the Tobin would be an aligned step in this direction that does prioritize transit-dependent riders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. And I can, for the record, commit that we will certainly have public outreach meetings in Chelsea, and we'll work with Green Roots to figure out where and when. So thank you very much.
I'm sorry, David. In the chat, I received a comment saying that the Conservation Law Foundation has a comment.
Okay, so if whoever's on from the Conservation Law Foundation, if you could raise your hand, we will unmute you and you can make your comment verbally.
Hi, my name is Saritha Ramakrishna. I'm with Conservation Law Foundation, and I wanted to comment on item 8, Like Green Routes, we support the Tobin Bridge Managed Lanes Feasibility Study. We recommend that the study scope include travel demand models for both southbound and northbound lanes. And the lane configurations that should be studied include the Tobin Bridge with 2 lanes open for all vehicle use, and then 1 lane open only for bus use, and then 1 lane open for a high occupancy vehicle or a high occupancy toll that would result in HOVs paying a reduced toll or no toll at all. Desired outputs for each model run should ideally include bus travel time from route start to the Tobin Bridge crossing, volumes for all roads in GIS format, and average vehicle occupancy rate by lane for each of the 3 lanes. Want to echo Green Routes comments and saying that we request the study findings be presented to the Chelsea Transportation Task Force and other interested stakeholders. And we are also eager for the study to result in a Tobin Bridge southbound and northbound bus lane pilot program commencing no later than 2021. A bus lane on the Tobin Bridge would reduce trip times for bus riders and be a significant step towards achieving transit justice for Chelsea residents and workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments at this time? As noted earlier, if you have a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next up is the Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Lynn?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the advisory council met last week, and Betsy Harvey met with us to talk about the criteria and the revision of the criteria with the focus on equity. And we spent pretty much the entire meeting with her. It was very productive. And one big take home from the meeting was that the members are in pretty much agreement that we like to see as much emphasis on income, the disproportionate burden as much as the disparate impact, with understanding, that it will perhaps double count or have a bigger impact, or it magnify the consideration that we give to racial inequities, but we think that's a good thing. We are going to have a bonus meeting where we will talk about the pedestrian report card with Casey Claude, and that's pretty much going to be a presentation of a repeated presentation to this board in November, but we'll spend probably the entire time of the bonus meeting with her. And so I encourage members who would like to hear more about that. It'll be about the interactive report card to join us. And I just want to also say that I'm so proud of the other members of the advisory council, because they've been going along with these extra meetings. And I think it's also a testament to their commitment, but also the technology is allowing this to me, because these are remote meetings. People can join in very easily without having to make another trip to Boston. And they've also been very accommodating to my desire to extend our regular meetings by 15 minutes. And once again, that's because of their commitment to the MPO and transportation. And finally, we are going to have a meeting in August. We normally don't, but we are this year, and it's going to be an extended meet and greet of the current members of the advisory council, and we're working with Kate White to get other potential members, certainly other interested stakeholders, to participate in that meeting, see what we're all about, and hopefully join us. So I let you know, so that if you know other people who might be interested, or any parties that might be interested, that will be on the 12th, just feel free to let them know. It's going to of course, be a Zoom meeting. So with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions of Lynn from the MPO members? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of June 11th. Can I get a motion and a second to put them on the table, please? Please raise your hand so we can unmute you. Does anybody want to make a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
We've got Daniel Amstutz.
All right, unmute Daniel.
Hi, Daniel Amstutz, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Eric
Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I second that motion.
Thank you. Any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none. All those in, Please call the roll, John.
Will do, Mr. Chair. David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bishara,
Go ahead, John. You can come back to him.
okay,
John Bouchard, yes.
Okay, thank you. John Romano,
Abstain, I wasn't here.
okay. Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
thank you. Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
thank you. Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
thank you. Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes, thank you.
thank you. Len Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
thank you. Tom Kazis,
Tom Kansas, yes.
thank you. Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitz, yes.
thank you. Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
thank you. David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
thank you. Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
thank you. Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
thank you. Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
thank you. Thatcher Keyser,
Patrick Keyser votes yes.
thank you. Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
thank you. I see that Tina Cassidy has joined us, Mr. Chair, so I'll call for North Suburban.
Tina Cassidy, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
thank you. And Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
thank you. The motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Next up is more work scope on the Tobin Bridge Managed Lane Feasibility Study. Trustee?
Seem to just be having an issue with the unmuting here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. I'm Trustee Joshi, and I work in Trial Model Applications Group as a modeler at CTPS. This work scope is for a feasibility study for Tobin Bridge Managed Lane implementation. A managed lane is where one or more lanes of a roadway are designated for exclusive access to a set of users. This could be transit only or a combination of HOV and transit, or lanes controlled by a special toll program. This is a non-MPO funded study and is only for the task that CTPS will be completing for this study. We as CTPS will conduct a modeling feasibility study similar to the ones we conduct for the MPO. So to give you some background on the study, around in March 2020, Mass DOT completed an initial Tobin Bridge Managed Lane study and now wants to further evaluate travel impacts associated with it and perform sensitivity testing regarding different configuration of managed lanes. Mass DOT requested the CTPS provide modeling support for an analysis of various bus and HOV lane treatments for US Route 1, including the Tobin Bridge, and help analyze the potential benefits as a part of continuation of the study. All scenarios will represent the creation of a managed lane on US Route 1 over the Tobin Bridge with different exclusions. The managed lanes would extend southbound from Carter Street to Prospect Street and northbound from Warren Street to Carter Street. CTPS will model the scenarios in 2 phases in order to initially support a Mass DOT internal analysis with public consideration into the feasibility of a bus-only pilot in 2021, and then to comprehensively understand other potential access scenarios. The 4 proposed build scenarios will provide Mass DOT, stakeholders, and the public with insight into the conversion of one of the general purpose lanes to a bus-only or HOV lane. The phase 1 will include the bus-only lane scenario, and it is expected to last 12 weeks and is budgeted for $29,209. Phase 2 will include 4 scenarios, HOV 2 plus and bus only lane scenario, HOV 3 plus and bus only lane scenario, HOV 2 plus and bus only lane with reduced or no toll scenario, and recommended build alternative with revised transit service plan scenario. It is expected to complete in 9 months and budgeted for $85,179. This study will be conducted for the Bezier conditions and will be focused on peak period analysis. This study is expected to take approximately total a year and is budgeted for total of $114,388. Thank you. Is there any question or comment?
Thank you very much, Trustee. Very, very concise. Questions, comments from the MPO members? Please raise your hand if so. And Matt, I'm having trouble seeing people raise hands, so you need to let me know if somebody raises their hand, okay?
And we've got Jay Monty.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jay.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This is really exciting and I think really well timed and a great exercise to be doing. So thank you for putting this on the agenda. I'll happily support this. You did mention that this is not an MPO funded study, so I assume that means it's MassDOT funded, and there's probably a larger part of this study that is being managed by MassDOT. Is that the case? And I guess my question then goes to, what are the metrics by which these different options here will be evaluated on?
Right. So I will answer that, I think. So yes, this is a MassDOT funded study. This is work that is being done by CTPS for MassDOT. We also have a consultant on board, Kittleston. They are doing the traffic analysis that's not modeling, as well as the feasibility of how would you actually put a managed lane on the Tobin and where it would be. As to the metrics of how we would judge, it's your question how we would judge the pilot success, or how we would go from a study that says look at HOV2, HOV3, and HOV2 with tolls to figure out which one, if any, we might want to implement. I'm not sure which is your question, Jay.
I guess both, and maybe I'm a little bit out of the loop on, has MassDOT committed to a pilot? Is that already done, or that this would help you decide whether you're going to do a pilot?
So we have not yet committed to a pilot. We have to do our
Okay.
public outreach and do our analysis.
Mhm.
Our expectation, we did a phase 1 study to see if it was even worth going forward. That said, that study only looked at southbound, did not look at northbound.
Okay.
That it was worth going forward, which is why we're here today. So our expectation is, unless we find out something different, that there will be a bus lane pilot in the spring.
Great.
But that's not a commitment because we need to do this work.
Sure. Okay. And then I guess I can ask, what are the metrics for the phase 2?
Yeah, so I don't know that we actually developed the metrics for phase 2 because we are so focused on phase 1.
Okay.
So I think that's a work in progress.
Okay. Well, great. So please keep us in the loop on this. This is great news to hear that we're making quick progress with this.
Thank you, Jay. Other questions or comments from members?
Daniel Amstutz.
Hi, thank you. Just a clarification. So the options here, or what's being looked at, it would be repurposing one general travel lane going in northbound or southbound I guess you're not, I guess I'm a little confused. This is a bus lane, or it's a bus lane and an HOV lane in a number of these different sort of permutations. So it's only one lane that's actually being converted, but you're looking at whether it should be converted into several different possibilities. And I guess I'm curious, maybe this goes to Jay's question about the metrics, but I'm wondering what I guess the idea is, like, you would be you'd be looking at like how much traffic if you're doing like an HV2 versus an HOV3, like how much traffic that would affect. I guess there's these three different options on the phase 2, and I'm just trying to understand the differences between them.
Okay, so yes, to answer your first question, yes, all of this work is looking at taking one general purpose lane in each direction and converting it to either a bus only lane or a bus HOV lane. The pilot would be bus only, assuming the pilot actually happens. And again, I have no reason to assume it won't, but the pilot would be bus only. The ultimate decision about converting to HOV2 or HOV3 would depend based on the results of the model, right? How much, there's some tipping point where you don't want to negatively affect the improvements you're giving to bus riders in order to provide HOV2 as an example, right? So there is some, you can't have the answer sort of until you know what your parameters are, but that, yes, you're looking at traffic impacts of what happens to the bus lane and to the general purpose lanes if you become HOV2 or you become HOV3 or you become HOV3 with no toll, right? So there's some sense of, if making it HOV2 doesn't add any measurable traffic, maybe it's not even worth doing. If it overwhelms the bus lane, maybe it's not worth doing. There's all sorts of permutations that you would have to look at, and we're nowhere near there yet.
Thank you very much. I think this is a great project as well, and I support it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions or comments?
Tim Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is really exciting work, and looking forward to the outputs of it, and just obviously want to, confirm that we'll be working with you guys on this at the city, and in particular our sort of BTD engineering and our transit team. So I guess one question is, will this also look at with the potential travel time savings on runtime for the bus routes? Will it also consider how that could impact service on those routes? So would the travel time savings for the bus routes allow maybe an additional run, for example, with the existing kind of equipment used for each of those routes, and if those things could be kind of thought about after you look at the analysis? So
If you see Drashti's last bullet, recommended build alternative with revised transit service plan.
There it is.
There to take advantage of that possibility.
Yeah.
Everybody understands, I think, that in the post-COVID reality, our budget is not what we had expected it to be. So nobody should assume that we'll be adding service, but yes, we want to look at the possibility. Certainly, if the bus lane allows you to do that, we want to look at the possibility of doing that.
Okay. And just couple quick other questions. I'm assuming that emergency vehicles will be able to utilize the bus only lane, which in theory would have a benefit for that need. And then I don't know off the top of my head if there's any private shuttles, but would those be a consideration for the bus only lane? Or
so bus only is not just MBTA bus. So if there's a regional transit bus or a private bus, they would be allowed in the bus only. There is some level where a shuttle's not a bus, it's an HOV, right? Yeah. So it wouldn't be allowed in the bus lane, but it would be allowed in an HOV lane. As to emergency vehicles, I don't know the answer, but I think generally the answer is yes, they're allowed in any lane they need to be in. But I will confirm that and get back to you, Jim.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Got Brian Kane.
Yeah, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to echo my board member colleagues' strong support of this. The question, I think, is within the scope, or maybe it's within the pilot, David. Do you know how enforcement will be considered and how, do the studies have scope for looking at different enforcement models to maximize efficiency of what we're trying to do here and seeing where the traffic goes? Thank you.
Right. So that will not be part of the CTPS scope.
Okay.
But my expectation is that will be part of the MassDOT Kittleston work, right? Kittleston is doing the feasibility. So I believe that's part of their work of how, they're looking at, like, how do you divide the lane and designate the lane? How do you enforce the lane? They're doing all the engineering and enforcement type stuff.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Got Len Diggins.
Hey, Len.
Hi, thank you. Normally, I'd be all over this, and and I mean, I'm certainly in I'm certainly in favor of phase one. My concerns about phase two, are the disruption to travel patterns caused by COVID. I know you all have thought about this, and this kind of goes along with Jay's question about metrics for phase two. But if you could just share any thoughts that you feel that you would like to about how COVID, the pandemic, has affected your thoughts about phase two and when you'll move forward with it. I'd appreciate it. If it's premature for that, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me talk generally about COVID and how it affects this work scope. So this work scope is using a base case of pre-COVID traffic, because none of us have enough information yet to predict post-COVID traffic, although we are tracking it on a daily basis, and it is actually coming back relatively well. So as an example, there are bus routes that are operating at a lower capacity today, or lower frequency, or frankly not operating today because of COVID. We are assuming that those bus routes will come back, and we are modeling them as if they will be using the lanes. As to actually metrics will be where we actually start looking at actual real traffic, and that will be obviously, post-COVID traffic will impact that. So yes, if it looks like there is no benefit to adding HOV2 or HOV3, we just won't add HOV2 or HOV3. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Others?
Seeing none.
Thank you. Can I get
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the public who wants to talk about this? Who hasn't? Seeing none. Can I get a motion and a second to approve? And please raise your hand so we can call on you and state your name when making the motion.
Eric Barassa.
Hi, Eric Barassa. I make a motion to approve this Tobin Bridge managed lane feasibility study.
And Tom Bent.
I would like to second that motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller.
Yes.
John Bishara. We'll come back. John Romano.
Yes.
Okay.
John Bishara, yes.
Thank you, John. Samantha Silverberg.
Yes.
Laura Gilmore.
Yes.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane.
Brian Kane, yes.
Thank you. Len Diggins.
Larry Diggins, yes.
Thank you. Tom Kazis.
Tom Kadzis, yes.
Thank you. Jim Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Great. Jay Monty.
Jay Monty, yes.
Thank you. David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
Thank you. Daniel Amstutz.
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Thank you. Sheila Page.
Sheila Page, yes.
Thank you. Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Thatcher Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
thank you. Tina Cassidy,
Sorry, Tina Cassidy, yes.
thank you. Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Can you put the agenda up? Thank you. Next item is the Unified Planning Work Program. Sandy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I am here today to ask for the MPO's endorsement of the federal fiscal year 2021 Unified Planning Work Program. I'm going to put a link to the full document in the chat. 1 second. All right, there it is. So as you heard from Ben earlier, the UPWP committee voted this morning to forward the document to the MPO for endorsement. There are just a few changes from the draft document that you voted to put out for public comment on May 28th, mainly minor changes to budget numbers throughout the document. These reflect changes to work that has had to be delayed because of the COVID emergency situation. There are also a few other changes that reflect staff catching errors or responses to comments we've received. So those, as relates to the comments, as you'll remember, the MPO put the document out for a 30-day public comment period covering the entire month of June. That wrapped up on June 30th. We received 6 comment letters, all of which are available in one of your handouts, which covers Appendix B of the UPWP, and I'm going to put a link to that in the chat as well. I'm just going to run through each of the comments very quickly and provide a brief summary, and then you can read them on your own. Mass.otp provided a number of helpful comments about details in the document and verified that it meets requirements. The Regional Transportation Advisory Council encourages the MPO to continue to include a strong focus on equity in studies and supports opportunities to comment on study work scopes while in development if that does not burden staff. The MBTA Writer Oversight Committee noted a number of studies that they are enthusiastic about and said they are impressed with the MPO's public outreach efforts. The 495 Metro West Partnership appreciates the MPO's 3C planning and raised a number of concerns about regional distribution of study work products. The partnership is supportive of several FFY 2021 tasks and would like the MPO to reconsider a Framingham mobility study that was removed from the UPWP universe during the FFY 2021 development process. The Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, or ITDP, supports priority for bus transit-related analysis in several studies programmed in FFY 2021. And finally, a member of the public, Clark Frazier from Hingham, would like the MPO to look into studying bottlenecks in the Southeast Expressway, Old Colony commuter rail lines corridor, and advocates for additional funding for studies and for staff to examine the future travel needs of older residents of the region. Everyone who provided a written comment has received a written response from me. I am happy to take comments on and questions on the document and on the public comments. If there are none, I respectfully request that the MPO endorse the FFY 2021 UPWP so that it can be forwarded to MassDOT and then on to our federal partners for approval.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy from the MPO members? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve? And please raise your hand so you can be called on to make your motions.
Brian Kane.
I actually had a question, David.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. Yes, of course.
No worries. It's more about process and just how things work at CTPS. So the UPWP is sort of the work plan. I get that. What happens if other things sort of come in that have a higher priority, like the T needs a bunch of equity analyses done or something else? How does CTPS prioritize the work of the UPWP against other work that comes in?
So I will.
Then I'll be happy to make a motion.
I will answer first, and then Tegan, who is dealing with childcare issues, but may or may not be on right now. If she is and she wants to jump in, she certainly should. So generally speaking, the MPO prioritizes 3C work ahead of other work. So that is more definitive when it is something like the LRTP or the UPWP or the TIP. We don't let things get in the way of things that have a deadline. But if there is something, an MPO study that does not have a necessary deadline, and there's something from one of the agencies that does, and that the MPO approves the agency's work, then sometimes the agency's work gets slotted in and other work slows down a little. But generally speaking, if it's a 3C requirement with a 3C deadline, none of the agencies get in the way of that work. But if it's other work, we work with staff to work it out.
Thank you. And I'd be happy to make a motion to approve this if that's acceptable at this time.
I believe that Len has a question.
Len, you have a question?
No, I just wanted to make the motion.
Oh, good.
So,
Second it, Len. Go ahead and make a second the motion.
so I love the UPWP, and if there's anything I wanted to do as Chair RTAC was to make the motion to approve the UPWP. Thank you.
So motion having been made and seconded, please call the roll, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David Moeller.
Yes.
John Bishara.
John Bishara, yes.
Thank you. John Romano.
John Romano, yes.
Thank you. Samantha Silverberg.
Yes.
Laura Gilmore.
Yes.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane.
Kane, yes.
Leonard
Brian
Diggins.
Kane, yes.
Oh, thank you. Leonard Diggins.
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis.
Kadzis, yes.
Thank you. Jim Fitzgerald.
Jim Fitz, yes.
Thank you. Jay Monty.
Jay Monty, yes.
Thank you. David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz.
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page.
Sheila Page, yes.
Thank you. Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Thank you. Thatcher Keyser.
Thatcher Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Wynn.
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy.
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable.
Jennifer Constable, yes.
And Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
The next two items are amendments on the TIP, but I believe we accidentally left another TIP amendment item, TIP amendment number 6, off the agenda. We approved it on June 25th with a date of endorsement for July 16th. So with everybody's indulgence, Matt is going to do both 5, 6, and 7. So Matt, let's start with 5 and we'll take 6 and then we'll take 7. Unless, if anybody objects to doing 6 now, please let me know, but it has had its 21-day public comment period. And we did agree we'd endorse it today when we adopted it. All right, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, everyone. I appreciate your time today. So for my first presentation today, as the chair said, I'll give you a quick recap of Amendment 5 to the federal fiscal years 2020 through 2024 TIP. Amendment 5 was released for a 21-day public review period following a vote by this body at the June 11th MPO meeting. The public comment period for the amendment closed on July 7th, and we received 15 public comments on Amendment 5. Beginning first with the details of the amendment, there are 2 tables posted to the MPO meeting calendar under today's date that explain the contents of Amendment 5. One table is a summary of the amendment itself, and the other table is the full tip tables that show the amendment included. Amendment 5 includes just one project, the Midlife Overhaul of Mbta ferry vessels. This project is being paid for using Federal Highway Administration ferry boat program funds, though these funds are being flexed to the Federal Transit Administration to carry out the project. For this reason, the project is shown in the highway portion of the tip rather than the transit portion, because that's where the funding originates. This project's total cost is just over $1.1 million and is proposed for funding in the current federal fiscal year, fiscal 2020. As for public comments, all 15 comments were in support of the amendment and came from community members on the South Shore. Like the amendment tables, the full text of these comments is posted to our meeting calendar for your review. Comments were received from, again, 15 people, Ruth Ann Stiles, Melissa Risotto, Marjorie Wiseman, Donna Purcell, Kit Miller, Elizabeth Doyle, Carol Adolph, Eric Bullen, Robert Paul, Jason McCann, Pat Cormier, Kathleen Berry, Jill McElroy, Kylie Clapper, and Gail Whitcomb Richmond. Collectively, the commenters highlight the importance of the MBTA ferry system in providing transportation options and alleviating congestion for residents and commuters of the South Shore. They advocate for the continued maintenance of the ferry system, noting that this project is crucial in supporting the long-term reliability of this vital resource in the years to come. That's all I have on TIP Amendment 5. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair for questions and a vote on the amendment's endorsement.
Thank you, Matt. Does anyone have any questions on this amendment for Matt? Seeing and hearing none, please call the roll, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David Muller.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. John Bishard.
John Bishard, yes.
Thank you. John Romano.
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Laura Gilmore.
Yes.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane.
Mr. Chairman, did you take a motion and a second on this amendment?
Oh, excellent.
If not, I'd be happy to make it, and then you could record me as a yes.
Brian, thank you so much. You're right. I did not. Thank you, Brian. We did actually not take a motion in a second. We went from Matt's wonderful presentation directly to voting. So
it was wonderful.
Thank you, Brian. Brian Kane makes a motion to approve this amendment. Is there a second?
Tina, would you be willing to provide a second?
Certainly I would, and I would also vote in favor.
Thank you, Tina.
Noted. So we have Leonard Diggins would be next.
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Katzis.
Katzis, yes.
Thank you. Jim Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Jay Monty.
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz.
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page.
Sheila Page, yes.
Thank you. Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Thank you. Thatcher Keyser.
Thatcher Keyser votes yes.
Thank you. Darlene Nguyen.
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Thank you. Tina Cassidy has provided her vote. And Jennifer Constable.
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Thank you. And Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Matt, do Amendment 7 first, and then we'll go back to 6.
Okay, let me just pull something up here. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. For my second presentation today, I'll give you an overview of Amendment 7 to the federal fiscal years 2020 through 2024 TIP. This is right in the mix here of Amendment 5 and 6. And so we've got a lot of moving pieces here, but Amendment 7 is a new amendment, the only new amendment today. And there's a summary table detailing the contents of Amendment 7 posted to the MPO meeting calendar under today's date, which you're welcome to reference at any point. Like Amendment 5, which we just discussed, Amendment 7 includes one project, the awarding of a Mobility for All grant from the Federal Transit Administration to the Metro West RTA. This grant will support MWRTA in exploring a new demand response accessibility model along with complementary technology. This service will expand access to transportation options for seniors and people with disabilities within the Metro West region by supporting strategic partnerships with coordinating Council on Access and Mobility agencies. Customers will now be able to request trips on demand rather than needing to book a ride in advance, eliminating a significant barrier for many who use the existing service to get to medical appointments and access other essential destinations. The FTA Mobility for All grant is for $300,000 with $75,000 in matching funding coming from state contract assistance. This project is proposed to be amended into federal fiscal year 2021, though we're taking the amendment here in fiscal 20 to ensure that the project is ready to go early in fiscal 21, which begins October 1st of 2020. Pending a vote by this body, Amendment 7 will be released for a 21-day public review period, putting it on track for a final vote at the August 6th MPO meeting. And that's all I have on TIP Amendment 7. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair for questions.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions for Matt?
Seeing none.
Thank you. Seeing and hearing none. Is there a motion and a second? Please raise your hand and state your name, and thank you, Brian.
Len?
Sorry about that. I motion to approve the amendment and send it out for review.
And Eric?
Eric Barassa, I second this motion.
Motion being made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bishara,
You're unmuted, John.
John Bishara, yes.
thank you. Joan Romano,
John Romano, yes.
thank you. Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Laura Gilmore, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Kansas, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Thatcher Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn votes yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now, as mentioned earlier, we're going off the agenda. We accidentally left off Amendment 6 to the tip. Its public comment period closed yesterday, so it is legitimately before us today. So Matt, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll briefly give you an overview of Amendment 6 to the federal fiscal years 2020 through 2024 tip. After a vote by this body, Amendment 6 was released for a 21-day public comment period beginning on June 25th. The public comment period ended yesterday, July 15th, and no public comments were received on the amendment. Amendment 6 includes 4 projects, 1 highway project, and 3 transit projects, all in federal fiscal year 2020. Documents detailing these projects are available on the MPO's meeting calendar under the June 25th date. So if you would like to follow along, I would direct you to that date. Beginning with the highway project, 1 new project is being added to the tip, which is a bridge maintenance project on 3 bridges on Interstate 93 near the Boston-Milton border. This project is proposed for funding using statewide highway infrastructure program, or HIP funds. The total cost of this project is approximately $11.5 million. On the transit side, 3 Metro West RTA projects are proposed for addition to the tip. The first is the purchase of 6 Type E and 8 Type D compressed natural gas vehicles, all of which are fully accessible. This project is proposed for funding using roughly $1.1 million in FTA 5339 bus and bus facilities funds, with the matching funding coming from toll credits. 2 MWRTA operating assistance projects are also proposed for funding in Amendment 6. These projects aim to increase evening and weekend service on high ridership MWRTA bus routes, and will also provide for a study to analyze the feasibility of adding Sunday service to certain routes. Both projects are funded through discretionary grants from MassDOT's Rail and Transit Division. The combined total cost of these projects is just under $600,000. That's all I have on tip Amendment 6. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair for questions and a vote on endorsement.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? Seeing and hearing none, can I get a motion in a second, please? Please raise your hand and state your name when you make the motion.
Patrick Keyser,
I make the motion.
and Daniel Amstutz.
Daniel Amstutz seconds the motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded, please call the roll, Jonathan.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bishara,
John Bishara, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Laura Gilmore, yes.
Eric Barassa, come back, Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Kansas, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitz, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Benton, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Patrick Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
and is Eric Barassa back?
Eric Barassa, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next up on the agenda is the TIP project selection criteria for capacity management and mobility. Matt, I think you're up first, and then Betsy.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I'll actually, Betsy's here and she's available for questions, but I'll actually just walk us through the whole presentation today, since I know we're tight on time and want to keep things moving. So I promise this will be my final presentation today. So I'll walk you through the changes that we are proposing for the capacity management and mobility criteria to evaluate prospective TIP projects. Before we start, I do want to direct you to a companion table for this presentation, which has been posted to the MPO meeting calendar under today's date. Please feel free to follow along there as we talk, and that summarizes the changes that we are proposing. And as I noted, we do have some time constraints today, so we're going to work through this content fairly quickly. As Tegan mentioned in her executive director's report at the start of the meeting, we do have office hours scheduled where Betsy Harvey, Kate White, and I will be available to discuss the criteria changes and the associated public outreach efforts should we not get to all your questions or comments today. Those office hours are next Monday, July 20th at 1 p.m. And again, if you're planning on coming, please do sign up by noon tomorrow. We're also looking forward to our focus group the week of July 27th. And thank you again to those who have responded to that availability survey. And at that focus group, we'll start discussing point allocations across goal areas. Again, if you haven't already responded to that survey to let us know about your availability, please do so as well by noon tomorrow. And we will follow up tomorrow afternoon with that final date and time. And in addition to those opportunities that we've created for you all to provide additional feedback and input, I do want to reiterate that your feedback is welcome at any time outside of those formal meeting settings. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Betsy, or Kate if you have any questions or comments on the TIP criteria or the associated public outreach efforts. So this is the ground that I'm hoping to cover during today's presentation. Start out with some goals for today and a couple of notes to frame the conversation. Talk a little bit about the feedback that we heard from this board, as well as from some key stakeholders. We'll discuss then the proposed changes to the current criteria, along with the equity scoring for the capacity management and mobility section, before talking briefly about some next steps and opening it up for discussion with whatever time we have remaining. So beginning with some goals for today. The goals are really twofold. First, for you all to provide feedback on the initial proposals for the capacity management and mobility criteria revisions. And then second, to discuss the equity scoring overlay for capacity management and mobility. So a couple of notes to frame the conversation. Capacity management and mobility is our second largest goal area, in a tie for points with system preservation, which we discussed at the last MPO meeting. At 29 points, this goal area represents just under 22% of all possible points. As established in last year's long-range transportation plan, Destination 2040, the goals for the capacity management and mobility goal area are to use existing facility capacity more efficiently and to increase overall transportation options. There are 11 specific objectives associated with those goals. Rather than going through all 11 of those, I'll summarize them by highlighting their 4 key themes. First is to increase access to and reliability of all modes, especially non-SOV travel options. Second is to connect destinations and travel modes by closing network gaps and implementing first and last mile solutions. Third is to emphasize low-cost operations improvements over more expensive capacity-adding projects. And fourth is to eliminate freight bottlenecks and enhance freight connections. So just like the last several presentations I've given on the criteria, I do want to take a minute to highlight some of the feedback that we've received on capacity management. Because Kate White walked you through the key takeaways from the public outreach that we did last fall at the June 25th MPO meeting, I'll focus today just on the feedback that we heard from MPO members, as well as from 2 key stakeholders, the Regional Transportation Advisory Council and Transportation for America. Through the survey that we sent out last December, we heard from you that increasing mobility options is key to promoting an economically vibrant and equitable region. We also heard that expanding the transit system should be a primary goal of the MPO, with a specific focus on increasing the prevalence of dedicated bus lanes as a means of promoting equity, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and alleviating congestion. We also held an in-person criteria focus group with several MPO members back in December. At that meeting, a similar interest emerged in prioritizing transit and non-auto modes. MPO members discussed the need to focus on shifting people to walking, biking, and transit, as solving congestion through increasing vehicle capacity alone is a non-viable long-run option. Creating new and better connections between non-auto modes also emerged as a critical need to promote greater modal shift to more sustainable transportation alternatives. In other feedback, the Advisory Council responded to a survey indicating that biking can only become a viable option for many people if better connections and safer infrastructure is created to support cycling. The Advisory Council also noted the negative impacts of congestion on quality of life and highlighted the importance of creating more transportation choices for people by focusing our resources on creating facilities that are truly multimodal. Finally, through our technical assistance project with Transportation for America, we heard that we should move away from our existing approach to some of the capacity management criteria, which largely awards points based on specific infrastructure improvements. And they requested that we sort of move to a system that measures increases in accessibility to jobs and services that result from a project. So over the last several months, MPO staff have been working with Transportation for America, as well as with our partners at MassDOT, to explore implementing the use of a tool to measure accessibility. We are not currently in a place to move in this direction yet, as we are still navigating licensing and other software questions, though we do agree that such a destination access approach is the best long-run solution for the TIP scoring criteria. So we hope to report back to you in the future on this topic and request that you sort of stay tuned for that conversation as we know more. So I'm going to dive into the key changes that we're proposing now to the criteria. Again, because we're on a time crunch today, I'm going to go through all of the criteria at once before opening it up for a discussion. And as we move into the criteria here, I do want to give a quick thank you to the whole certification activities team, and specifically Betsy Harvey for her work on the equity criteria, as well as to Eric Barassa and Tim Reardon at MAPC for their help in shaping these recommendations. So here's a summary of the approach that staff took when compiling these recommendations. Staff endeavored to incorporate new transit elements, including dedicated bus lanes, to focus pedestrian and bicycle criteria on creating new high utility links and closing gaps in the network, to move from vehicle delay to person delay measures, again, sort of keeping the focus on people, recognizing additional improvements, including loading zones, bike share stations, and additional accessibility infrastructure that weren't properly accounted for in the current criteria. And then finally, as has been the theme across all of these presentations, we endeavored to tailor the criteria to specific investment programs. So in implementing that approach, the new capacity management criteria fall into 3 buckets, which you see here along the left-hand side of this table. The first is our new criterion, which in this goal area includes a new measure of transit usability. We'll get into what that means here in just a minute. The second bucket includes the criteria that currently exist in our scoring system, but that were updated as a part of this process. Those criteria include improving the pedestrian and bicycle networks, improving truck movement, and reducing person delay, which is a sort of updated version of our vehicle delay criterion in the current TIP criteria. Finally, we also removed one criterion from the capacity management and mobility goal area, and that criterion was improving intermodal accommodations and connections to transit. This criterion was formerly a catch-all for improvements like creating connections between walking, biking, and transit, and improving parking at transit stations. So everything formerly scored under this criterion has been reorganized into the scoring for other criteria within this goal area, where the points were a more natural fit. So we didn't really get rid of the actual meat of this criteria, but rather just sort of reorganize things to make them a little bit clearer. One note, as I dive into the criteria on the coming slides, you'll notice a discussion topics section at the bottom of each slide. I won't reference these in detail along the way, but they're meant to outline some possible avenues for discussion that we can address after the presentation with any time that remains. Our first criterion today is project enhances transit usability. This is a new criterion that incorporates the calls in last year's long-range transportation plan to encourage dedicated bus infrastructure. This criterion includes points for dedicated bus lanes, queue jumps at intersections, and transit signal priority. The new criterion also allows projects to score points for improving bus stop location or spacing to promote efficiency and as well as implementing bus stop upgrades like countdown timers and shelters. These changes would need to be coordinated by the project proponent with the appropriate transit agency. This criterion would not be scored for bicycle and pedestrian projects and would be adjusted for the transit modernization program to include transit station parking enhancements. Transit modernization and major infrastructure projects can also score points here for transit expansions. And, one example of that would be the Green Line extension, which we're currently funding through federal fiscal year 2021. Moving now to project improves the pedestrian network and ADA accessibility. This is a revised version of the existing criterion of the same name, which proposes to use MAPC's local access tool to award points to projects based on the relative utility of any new sidewalks being added through the project. In this context, utility refers to how useful roadway segments are in connecting people walking with schools, shops, restaurants, parks, and transit stations. The updated criterion would also increase the focus on closing gaps in the existing sidewalk network and clarify how points are awarded for ADA improvements. Bicycle and pedestrian projects would be eligible for more points under this criterion, emphasizing that improving connections for people walking and biking, or people walking, is one of the core elements of these projects. Additionally, transit modernization projects would be awarded points through this criterion if they improve transit station accessibility through investment in things like elevators, ramps, and level boarding platforms. On to project improves the bicycle network. Like the pedestrian criterion that we just discussed, this criterion awards points to projects that add new bicycle facilities to high utility links, with higher point values awarded to projects that implement separated or protected facilities rather than just painted bike lanes. This criterion also increases the focus on closing gaps in the network and awards additional points to projects that make specific accommodations for bike parking or the future inclusion of bike share stations. Bicycle and pedestrian projects would also be eligible for more points under this criterion, just as they are in the pedestrian criterion. And transit modernization projects would be awarded additional points for enhancing bike parking and providing connections to transit stations for people biking. On now to improving truck movement. This criterion is a revised version of the existing one, which now includes a specific focus on improving truck conditions on freight corridors. This proposed criterion also aims to implement some of the lessons from last year's Future of the Curb study conducted by MPO staff, as projects can now score points for making accommodations for freight deliveries through dedicated curbside loading zones. This criterion would not be applicable to bicycle and pedestrian and transit modernization projects. Finally, we move to our last criterion of the day, project reduces person delay. This revised criterion is a combination of two current criteria, one focused on transit vehicle delay and one focused on auto delay. The revised version now brings both modes together into a unified criterion that measures anticipated reductions in person delay. This is an effort to implement the significant feedback that we've received both from this board as well as from members of the public and stakeholder and advocacy groups. As I noted earlier, this feedback centered largely on a desire to limit the focus on reducing auto congestion as a discrete goal and to move towards a more holistic measure of mobility that takes into account the movement of people broadly across both auto and transit modes. This new criterion would award additional points to projects that address mobility on specific types of routes, including bus routes that are below on-time performance standards, and national highway system routes that are designated as unreliable for all modes. This criterion would not apply to bicycle and pedestrian projects. It would focus only on transit passenger delay for transit modernization projects and the associated improvements to transit reliability through those projects. So that's it for the base criteria changes. I do want to take a few minutes to discuss the equity scoring and some next steps before opening it up for discussion with our last few minutes. So I'll quickly run through how we're going to evaluate equity within the capacity management and mobility goal area. As my colleague Betsy Harvey has detailed in recent presentations to this board, the proposal is to have two parallel processes. One is to evaluate the criteria in each goal area that we choose to be equity criteria. For example, if we choose incorporate resiliency into project design, we'd evaluate it as we usually do, which results in the base score as you see on the left here. The other process is to identify the equity populations that are in the project area that would be affected by the project. The outcome of this process is an equity multiplier, which would be multiplied by the base score to get the final score for that criterion. So for each goal area, we'll choose a subset of the criteria to evaluate for their impacts on equity populations. For capacity management and mobility, we propose to evaluate the first three criteria at the top of this table, those that are here in bold. Those are project enhances transit usability, project improves pedestrian network and ADA accessibility, and project improves the bicycle network. We chose to focus on these criteria for several reasons. These needs were identified in the long-range transportation plan needs assessment through public outreach and data analysis as critical to equity populations. In our outreach for the TIP criteria last fall and winter, we also heard in particular the need for improved transit reliability and services, especially for buses, and the need for improved and accessible sidewalks and bikeways that connect to transit services. And so that's where the emphasis comes from here. As for next steps, we are in the process of wrapping up our discussion today of the capacity management and mobility goal area. At the next MPO meeting, we will wrap up our discussion of all of the base criteria changes by discussing the economic vitality goal area. And then as we get into the latter part of August and into September, some of the future MPO meetings there, we will discuss some test scoring, which we anticipate beginning here in the next few weeks, along with public input that we receive from our second round of public outreach. And on the public outreach front, we do plan to release a survey sometime next week to begin to get feedback on the changes that we've proposed to the criteria so far. And we'll follow up with the board with more information on that survey. And then we'll obviously be sending it out to our email network and through our social media channels and all of those fronts. So please be on the lookout for that. So again, we'll come back and discuss those survey results at the August 20th meeting, along with some test scoring, and then we'll get into further discussions in September to refine the project selection criteria. So with that, I'm happy to take questions or comments with any remaining time we have for our final presentation of the day.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions or comments from the MPO members at this time?
Samantha?
Hi, thanks, Matt, and thanks, Betsy, and the rest of the team for all your work on this. I had one question about, I saw transit usability was not scored for bike and ped projects. Is that because connections to transit are captured in other criteria?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is yes. So we've, the connections to transit for both bicycle and pedestrian projects would be in the actual improves the pedestrian network or improves the bicycle network criteria. And so we are recognizing those new connections. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Other questions?
Daniel Amstutz?
Hi, thank you. Yes, and thank you for all of your work on this, Matt and Betsy and everyone. Just a couple of questions briefly. And I apologize if this is covered in a different criteria. It's sometimes a bit difficult to remember what is covered in the other criteria versus this criteria, but one question first. Is the pedestrian, for the pedestrian network, is there somewhere else where pedestrian crossings are addressed or considered as part of the scoring? I just think like just adding sidewalks is one thing, but is there another criteria that covers, let's say, improving a crossing of a high-speed roadway, for example, for a pedestrian, whether it's installing signals or putting in a specific pedestrian signal? I don't see anything on this mobility scoring that seems to touch on that. And then my second question was, can somebody could just give like a 30-second explanation of the high utility, I guess that's the MAPC local access score. I'm just trying to understand, is that when it says high utility, does that mean like a bike or like a sidewalk or a walking route that there's a lot of businesses or access points or trip attractors like on a specific route, or does that include things like a sidewalk from a neighborhood that leads to an area that has lots of trip attractors? So just I don't think I've read that as part of the local access score, so I'm just getting an understanding if anybody can give a brief explanation. Thanks.
Definitely, yeah, thank you for those questions. I guess I'll take the first one first. So on the pedestrian crossing improvements, and especially as it relates to signals, so we've sort of added some points in the safety goal area for pedestrian signals. And then also we'll be looking at, other crosswalks and things like that through that goal area. So we are recognizing those improvements. As part of the safety goal area. And I totally understand that, this is a lot of ground to cover and these presentations tend to be very dense. So totally appreciate that this stuff can, sort of get lost in the shuffle here. So thank you for the clarifying question. And then your second question on the high utility links, MAPC's local access tool essentially defines utility as how useful any given segment of sidewalk would be in connecting people with, specifically people on foot with schools, shops, restaurants, parks, and transit stations. And so these things that are trip generators that, people obviously will want to walk to, then, each roadway segment sort of gets a score based on, how important that segment is to increasing access to those places. And if you're interested in more on the methodology, I can do a little bit more digging and get back to you if that would be helpful.
That's okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments?
And Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Matt and Betsy. I have a few questions, so I hope you can bear with me. I guess my first question relates to the bonus points. So is there, if you add in the bonus points or any of the criteria, can you go above is there still a limit on the total number of points? So for example, I could, for the pedestrian one, I could have 4 points as a base for adding sidewalks on a high utility link, but then can I also get all of the bonus points, or is there a limit? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're still sort of, fine tuning the point structure and the actual point allocations for any given improvement. And so that's something that we'll focus on in the focus group that we're having with MPO members coming up in late July. And then we'll talk more about that as we get into August. And so the point values that are in, if you're looking at the handout that's posted online, the point values there are sort of just placeholders for right now to give a sense of what something could look like. But those are, very much open for discussion. And so, the way that we would anticipate that working is sort of like the current criteria where you would be eligible for, up to a total number of points for any given criterion. That includes both the base points and the bonus points. But we would obviously want to structure those points in a way that makes sense sort of in the broader context. But we very much anticipate having more conversations with you all over the next 2.5 months on sort of how to refine those. So right now they're sort of just placeholders.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd also like to talk about the change in the transit usability. So the original criteria related to transit vehicle delay. And your new criteria is now sort of based on the kind of change or improvement that's made. But each of those improvements, whether it's a dedicated bus lane or priority or whatever, that all comes down to improving travel time. And so what you've done is but I could add a bus lane and save 10 minutes, or I could add a bus lane that saves 1 minute, and it still gets the same amount of points. Or I could add signal priority to save 5 minutes and save a bus lane, add in a bus lane that only saves 1 minute, yet the bus lane gets more points than the priority. So I would suggest that actual travel time would be a much better indicator or criterion to use, because that's actually that's the outcome that people perceive, is saving time. And I think the people that use buses, speaking of equity on buses, 60% of the people on the bus riders on the T are low income or minority. Those are the people that can least afford any increases and can benefit most from savings in travel time. So I would recommend that your criterion relate to the benefit directly, which is travel time. And that also gets at accounting for the scope or the size of the project. Again, I can add with this laundry list approach, there's really no accounting for the scope or length or actual outcome that people perceive. So I think it would make sense to go back to the benefit, which is measuring the benefit, which is travel time. I'd also, if I have a minute, if you could bear with me, I'd also like to talk about the criterion that relates to the reduces vehicle congestion. I know you've now changed it to person delay, which may make sense, but I sort of have a question. How will you calculate total person delay? So for example, if I save travel time on a bus route, but I also increase congestion. Say I add in a bus lane and I take away a traffic lane. Well, my change in person throughput time may be 0, because those two things counterbalance each other. And that may be okay in terms of measuring that. But now you're double counting, because I already have a criterion that relates to saving, improving transit, or if you take my suggestion, in reducing travel time. So you're sort of double counting the transit benefit. But also you could have a project, for example, if I add in a complete streets project where I add in a bike lane, and I reduce travel time for both buses and vehicles, and yet I can only go, I would get maybe 0 points in transit, and I can only go -1 on this particular thing or maybe -2. I would suggest that you have the capability. I'm not sure how you calculate this person delay, but I think it's some double counting. But also I would suggest that you have the capability of being able to go negative on both this criterion as well as the transit criterion, because I could perceive of a project that really screws the bus riders. And I think there would be, again, I think from an equity point of view, that would be bad. And I think you should be able to account for the negative impact of doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I will say, on the person delay, I mean, we are trying to, that's sort of where we move the former transit vehicle delay. And so we are looking to account not just for the sort of adding a bus lane or, the actual physical improvements, but then also in the person delay, thinking about what the impact of those improvements on, on the actual trip travel time. But yeah, we can definitely think more about how these things work together and make sure that the focus is on sort of the outcome and not the output. And yeah, I mean, we can definitely have further conversations on what this looks like. Because we want to make sure that we're getting it right here. So I appreciate the feedback.
Others?
David Koses.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for this work. I'm just wondering, when we use the word transit here, are we talking about roads that have any type of transit, you know, not only MBTA or RTA fixed routes, but also roads that have, you know, other fixed route shuttles that operate on it, or even frequent private shuttles that operate on it? Or are we only talking about public transit from MBTA and the RTAs?
Yeah, so I believe we've historically measured that mostly with fixed route, you know, RTA service. I mean, things that we actually have data on, like where the routes are and those sorts of things. I don't believe that we've taken into account private shuttles because I think the information on those is a little bit more sparse in terms of having, you know, like a holistic data set on where those routes are and ridership and those sorts of things. But we can, you know, look into sort of, yeah, if there are ways to better take into account private shuttles, and we're, you know, certainly open to suggestions on that if you have further thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
Others?
Sheila Page.
Thank you. And thank you for all your work on this and everybody on the team. I just had a question, and I may have misunderstood the local access, the MAPC local access score. Is that something, and maybe Eric can answer this also, is that something that that score will be kept current as new developments and we'll say maybe transit gets rerouted?
That is a great question. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, I see Eric raising his hand, so maybe I'll let him weigh in on the plans to sort of keep that updated.
Yes, we keep that updated. It's being used by MassDOT for some of their safe routes to school planning. I think it's recommended for the Complete Streets grants that municipalities apply for, that they also use that tool. And we update it based on as we update our development database and other demographic data. So we do keep on top of that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Others?
Seeing none.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, thank you all.
Next up on the agenda is a discussion of the lighting project for I-93 and Route 24. John Bishara.
I have so many things on mute. Let me know when you can hear me.
I can hear you, John.
All right. Jonathan, just to let you know, I have a consultant from Trans Systems also on the line, Lenny Velichansky and Todd Liebengood. So they might be providing some input to the discussion. I'm going to go through a little bit of the project design for Randolph Quincy, the replacement and rehab of the lighting system along I-93 at the Route 24 interchange. As everyone on the MPO knows, this project was voted off a few months ago for funding based on questions that were raised at that time. The goal of today is to provide you with an update in the design and the permitting that's been completed. It's still a project that is desperately needed along this area, and is something that we'd like to bring back in the future, but want to make sure that we're at least bringing the MPO on board with the project, getting your input as we're finalizing things, and hopefully get your support for bringing this back in the future. So next slide, please. Obviously, a locus of the area of the Route 24 Route 24 to I-93 northbound interchange area, exit 4. Next slide. A little bit more of an aerial specific sightline view. We'll also look at some heat maps and some existing lighting conditions in a moment. Next slide. So our project goals are to improve our roadway lighting conditions in this area, We want to increase driver and maintenance worker safety as part of this project and improve our system reliability and reduce our maintenance costs. Next slide. This location is a high crash location. There have been over 500 crashes in the past 5 years, of which one was a fatality. 155 crashes occurred during low traffic volume and under darker conditions. And then there have been another 48 crashes that occurred at dawn or at dusk. Just a couple statistics here. Of those 203 crashes during low light conditions, 56 crashes involved personal injury and the one fatality, which I already referenced. And then multiple crashes are occurring, which are striking the light poles that are along the side of the roadway. Loss of light poles due to vehicle hit worsens lighting conditions and requires increased maintenance by MassDOT and their team. Due to the loss of the poles, illumination levels are well below minimum standards. Also, the lack of light uniformity, which is something that I would think people who are driving the area or other parts of the Commonwealth, bright areas and dark areas are prevalent in a lot of those locations, and that's why we're looking at trying to develop some uniformity along our highway systems for consistency. Replacing light poles requires lane closures, further reducing the safety of motorists and putting our maintenance crews at risk. Next slide. So we actually had a light pole knocked down in May of this year on Route 24 northbound in the entrance to I-93 northbound. The type of lights, there was some discussion of this a few months back when we first brought this project forward. These are Cobra head style lights that are along city streets in many communities. They're really not the best usage on a roadway of this type, and that's why we're looking at upgrading of those of that system. Excuse me. Next slide. We did we conducted an as-built photometrics of the lighting conditions. Not going to go through all the specifics here, but we're showing that our, what our average of the light coverage and foot candles in that first column, 1.4 to 2.8 foot candles is what we're getting on the roadway and what's spilling over along this area. Next slide. Our current photometrics are what the roadway illuminance statistics were down below 1 foot candle in those areas. The low levels of illumination do not meet standards, obviously. We're recommending an average roadway illumination from our IES, which is our Illuminating Engineering Society manual, is, for major interchanges is 1.8 foot candles. You can see we're well below that. MassDOT is cognizant of the location and conditions, and we agreed to a lower illumination level of 1.0 foot candles. Next. The proposed improvements will replace 133 existing Cobra-style light poles with 11 high-mast towers located outside the clear zone or behind the guardrail. We're going to install all new conduit and wiring. We're going to replace the 2 existing lighting load centers and the transformer. We're going to upgrade the building housing of those lighting load centers and the transformer, and we're going to provide a level of illumination that's consistent with current design standards. Next slide. From the Illumination Engineering Society manual, which is the IES, the benefits that are derived from the application of a high-mast lighting system is designed to provide illumination of the roadway as well as the area immediately beyond the roadway. High-mast lighting tends to illuminate the entire travel corridor within the roadway allowance, provides greater visual comfort to the traveling motorist by improving their peripheral vision and by better illuminating roadside obstacles, fixed structures, and other similar objects in the field of view of a driver. Next slide. Additional benefits: the high-mast towers are located outside of the clear zone or behind the guardrail, which is going to minimize the potential for driver collisions, which will help reduce our maintenance costs overall, and a reduced power consumption with this type of lighting system. Next slide. The initial design highlights, we had 11 150-foot tall high mast light towers. There are 10 fixture ring assembly on each high mast light tower. To minimize the light trespass average roadway illuminance level, we've reduced from 1.8-foot candles recommended by the manuals for major interchange connection to a 1.0-foot candle. We have cutoff shields on the fixtures facing environmentally sensitive areas. Next slide. The concerns that have been raised, impacts to nocturnal wildlife, specifically light trespass into priority habitat areas, lighting zone 0, exceeding recommendation of 0.0-foot candles for zone 0, and then the light color temperature. General light pollution, including visibility of starry night sky, are concerns that we've heard. Next slide. So subsequently, we've made some design revisions. We've reduced the height of 6 high mast towers to 135 feet. We've reduced the light color temperature to 2700 Kelvin. We've introduced the dummy fixtures facing environmentally sensitive areas, and we've updated our categorical exclusion checklist, which is for compliance with MPO. Just before I go to the next slide, the dummy fixtures facing the environmentally sensitive areas, because of weight balance, we still have, the assembly will look like a 10 ring assembly, but we've turned off those fixtures on the environmentally sensitive areas, but we really need those for weight balance. Next slide. Our new, our photometric analysis, in that first column, the average, you can see we were previously 1.4 to 2.2. Now we're in the 1.0 to 1.1 on average for our roadway illumination. Next slide. All right, so this graphic shows the 11 high mast locations. The green are the 135-foot high mast, and the blue are the 150 high mast. I think the next slide is going to show us a heat map. Next slide. Which will show, the heat map will show where our greatest illumination is along, the way the interchange is oriented, 24 north and southbound is to the bottom of the screen. I-93 is horizontally along the top of the screen, and the most top is I-93 southbound. You can see what our heat map indications, having a lower foot candle along the blue hills as best we can. Next slide. I would ask our consultants from Trans Systems, they may still be muted, Lenny and Todd, if there's anything that I may have missed or that you would like to add to the presentation.
Raise your hand if so.
This is Todd. I'm sorry, David. You did a great job, John. I have one thing to add is the uniformity on the photometrics. You could see that the uniformity of the original design had a lot of bright and dark spots, meaning that the focus was on the acceleration and deceleration merge points with the Cobra heads. And if you ever were in a parking lot with bright lights looking beyond and you had the dark area, you could not see in the dark area. And that's the reason for the high mast lights, is to create a more uniformed lighting so that you can see either vehicles stopped on the side that are broken down or need assistance, or animals coming towards the roadway. With the Cobra heads, it creates the brightness and the dark spots not so uniformed, and you can't see oncoming items or upcoming items that your headlights don't hit. So when you looked at the uniformity of the metrics with the high mass, it's more of a gentle uniform lighting that illuminates everything around the roadway and on the sides. So the uniformity is important. So we were trying to get a 5-to-1 ratio between brightness and darkness. So I just wanted to add that, but thank you, John.
No, I really appreciate that, Todd. You know, you're the lighting designer and know all the specifics. I'm just the guy who's trying to help find the money and move the project along. I appreciate that.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions, David?
Questions from MPO members? I will call on the public too, but I want to do the MPO members first. Sheila Page.
Hi, thank you. I very much appreciate you working on this because when we started to change the amendment, I just felt like with all the opposition, we didn't have the answer. So I very much appreciate John and your team of going back and figuring this out. So thank you. I do have a few questions. I'm wondering, yeah, I'll just say all my questions, I guess, because that'll be easier. I'm wondering, there's a stream on the north side of I-93. And it looks like the light spills fairly far over. Is there a way to, is there a metric that how you decide, I guess, how far you want the light spill to go beyond the roadway? And if there's a possibility of reducing that in any way by maybe moving the light poles on the inside of what is that, the northbound lane? Or I don't know where it is. Southbound lane, I guess, on the inside of it, if that would help. And then I'm wondering, have you done any outreach to, I think it was the Appalachian Mountain Club and Friends of the Blue Hills, because I think they came out in strong opposition to this. So I'm wondering if you've done extra outreach or this is considered the outreach.
No, I'm not sure if I'm still unmerged. Anything else, Sheila? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I think
I'm going to
that was
let Todd handle the specifics. I'm going to let Todd handle the specific on the location of the lights. I want to respond that we did receive outreach from International Dark Sky Association, Appalachian Mountain Club, Sierra Club, back in April of this year as part of the we received response letters. We responded back to them. We did provide coordination with them prior to today. We did respond back with letters to them and demonstrated what items we were addressing as part of the design, and that's what contributed to reducing the high mast lights in some locations, along the Blue Hills there. But I'll let Todd answer any other specific questions on our outreach to those particular entities, as well as your first question about the location of the high mast lights. Todd?
The first question you had was about the Blue Hill River, which is that stream you mentioned to the north. We looked at that and ran many different scenarios to reduce the light trespass in that direction with the dummy fixtures, the cutoff shields, and then we lowered the fixtures to from 150 feet to 135. And that is the best possible solution that we can meet the roadway criteria and reduce the light trespass to the north. So we did take that into account already, in addition to lowering the color temperature to 2700 Kelvins. The consideration to have the light fixtures on that side of the road is the slow lane. We didn't want to have the light fixtures on the fast lane. That way reducing potential issues if there is service and maintenance required. A vehicle parked on the side of the road to service and maintain would be on the slow lane. There's a larger shoulder on that side and guardrails. So that was the reason for the light fixtures to be on the north. As far as your question regarding the outreach, I'll let Lenny, if he's available, to speak to that, since they have, to initiate this project, they did some outreach prior, and then the subsequent adjustments we made to the design was in response to questions and concerns. Lenny, are you available to address the outreach?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, if you could just for a second to follow up on the first question, if you go back one slide to the heat map, you could see the river is shown here, and you could see that the levels of illumination are reducing as we approach the river. The blue color here is basically 0-foot candles, so there is no light there at all. And the green light is anywhere between 0.4 and transitioning to 0. So the intensity of light gets lower as we approach the river, the stream.
So I have so what's the foot candle of the red?
The red's bright. The red is
Yeah,
the red is really the road. Those are the bright spots, and that's where on the road we are meeting 1 foot candle. As John mentioned, the IAS criteria is 1.8 foot candles for major interchanges. We have reduced it to 1. So that is an average levels of illumination along the highways.
The one and this works. So I mean, when I look at this, it's red and then it goes, you know, green to blue. Does this spacing work for your needs of not having light dark coming through the highway?
Yes, if you go to one more slide, actually 2 slides up. Okay, so you could see the average to minimum ratio. It varies between, you could see between 3.7 to 1 and 5.0 to 1. And 5, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 5 is really the maximum ratio that we are looking for. Anything above that would create that kind of discrepancy between light and dark areas. So this shows that it's a fairly constant level of illumination through the interchange. Todd?
But except for those red spots, where are those like up to 8.3 or?
That includes the red spots. This is
the average to minimum.
Right.
Okay.
It's based on the average to minimum ratio. And you could see in the left column, average is 1 or 1.1 foot candles throughout the road. Maximum, you can see the next column is 2.5 foot candles. That's basically right under the light.
Okay, thank you. I very much appreciate that. And I'm happy that you were able to reduce the light color as well. I think that was an important point. I think that was a high desire of a lot of the proponents.
Yes,
so,
that was definitely one of the, actually, I think the light color temperature was in a number of comments. And we went from 4,000 Kelvin to 2,700.
right, and 2,700 is what's there currently?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's what is currently designed with the high mass configuration.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila.
Other questions from MPO members? Seeing none, I do have questions from the public. Kelly Beatty with IDA Mass. Please, for the record, state your name and your association.
Great. I'm Kelly Beatty. I'm with the Massachusetts chapter of the International Dark Sky Association, and I was one of the people who commented back in April. And I want to say to John, this certainly represents a good faith effort. I know some of these changes were actually being discussed even before the April meeting, and so it's great to see that you've adopted some of them, some of our recommendations. I would add to what you've got there, and this is for Todd to consider. One of the issues with these high mass lighting systems is the inadvertent scatter that occurs, and I would argue that you should really think about painting the poles themselves black. That will reduce the scatter even more into the areas. And because you've done this great work, I think you at MassDOT ought to consider rolling out this kind of approach, low color temperature and shorter poles and dummy fixtures on all of your installations, certainly going forward, and maybe even look at them as on a replacement basis for when you do maintenance on the masts that you've already got. That said, it remains the case that my impression is that MassDOT has started using these high mast installations as a kind of one-size-fits-all solution. And I just wanted to read something since Marie Rose in her comments to us cited the IES document RP 818 about the desirability of high mast lighting. It kind of cherry-picked that section. And Matt, I think Matt Archer is going to put this in the chat session. This is the very next section, 10.4.3.2. When designing high mast lighting systems, it should be determined whether the use of such a system is economically justifiable or whether a conventional lighting system can achieve the established roadway lighting criteria at lower cost and with greater efficiency. End of quote. Now, maybe I'm missing something here, but all you have done up to this point is compare the new high mast system with your existing system, the HID, high pressure sodium lighting that you've got. And I'm wondering, did you at any point explore and spec out replacing the existing system with an equivalent system using LED lighting? And I want to draw specific attention to the energy efficiency of this. Obviously, high mast is more convenient for MassDOT in terms of maintenance. But I'm just doing a rough calculation here. You've got 11 poles. I'm going to use an average of 8 per pole because you've got some dummies. You've reduced the lumens to 63,000 per luminaire. That comes out to about 40 kilowatts of power being used. Your 133 existing poles, if you put in 80 watt LEDs, again, I'm just kind of ballparking it here, is about 10 kilowatts. That's 1/4 the energy use, or flipped around, this high mast system will use roughly 4 times more energy than an equivalent standard system would use. And so I ask again, did you actually go and look at using a sort of standard, Cobra-head for your words, lighting system using LEDs in this installation?
Well, Kelly, thank you for your comments. The high mass lights that we're looking at are LED lights powered with 240 volts versus the existing Cobra heads are using 120 volt. That in itself is saving the usage of wattage and energy. So we are reducing energy usage by using the LED lights on the high mass and also increasing the voltage, which reduces the wattage usage. So the 133 lights that are existing actually take a little bit more energy than the 11 fixtures that we're proposing because of the different voltage. So that's one statement. The other is that the factor is that the lights are too close to the roadway and are being hit, and we don't have uniform lighting because the poles aren't there. And that was the reason that the high mass lighting solution was being looked at as opposed to the Cobra heads and replacement of the LEDs.
Thank you. Next up is Steve Olaf.
Steve Olenoff, I'm speaking for myself now as a person concerned about, well, I'm concerned about safety along the road, but I'm also concerned about energy usage and our greenhouse gas goals. I noticed that in your goals for this, energy usage wasn't even mentioned. And you know, we're trying to achieve greenhouse goal objectives. The transportation uses 40% of our energy now. MassDOT is a big part of it, and you didn't even mention once in this whole presentation how much energy was used. And but you did just now mention, it appears, that you're using more energy than you did before. Anything we should be doing should be using less energy. I just don't understand how you could not be using less energy. with an LED bulb. If you go to the store and you used to buy a 60-watt bulb with 800 lumens, and well, it uses 60 watts. Now you go to the store, you buy a 60-watt equivalent. It it gives the same 800 lumens. It uses only 9 or 10 watts. That's a 6-to-1 savings. You'd expect to be the new lighting would be 1/6. Now, if you're lighting more than you did before, you want to light the sides of the roads more. And you didn't mention how far to the sides of the road you're going here. 10 feet, 20 feet, what's needed, but that wouldn't even double what you would need here. So it's still 2/3 of the energy that you're using here is, where is it going? You haven't explained that. Obviously, a lot of it's going into the sky, and a lot of it's going into the woods, into areas of critical habitat. If you go back to the diagram where you showed the heat spots, it looks like the lighting on the equivalent to the minimum lighting on the road is going hundreds of feet into the woods, and that's just wasted energy. So we need to achieve a reduction in energy to justify this project or any project that MassDOT does. So the numbers here don't add up at all. I just don't understand why there's so much energy being used and why you aren't making any attempts to reduce that.
Thanks, Stephen. This is Todd again from Trans Systems. We are using LED light fixtures for the high mass lighting. So the energy efficiency is going to be better than what the current high pressure sodium Cobra heads are using. As I mentioned before, we're using higher voltage to supply to those high mass lights so that the wattage, less wattage is being pushed out and achieving greater lumens at the same time to improve the roadway. The area beyond the roadway, yes, we are going out hundreds of feet with reduced lighting as we go further away from the road. It reduces just in the fact that they're high mass lighting. That is the uniformed needed ratio. We do have dummy fixtures facing the woods with cutoff shields and eliminating the upward sky lighting because these lights all focus down. As Kelly mentioned, that there is some scatter that we took into account to try to have a good bug rating on the light fixtures. And painting the high mass poles black is a good suggestion to also reduce that further. So the energy efficiency actually is better with a high mass solution than it is with the existing Cobra heads.
Well, I've heard this energy efficiency or efficiency argument before. So, you can go to the store and again, you can buy the high efficiency LED bulbs, but then if you put 6 times as many of them in your home, the net result is the same. What's important is the total amount of energy that you've used. You haven't said what it was before. It'd be nice if you could give us those figures and how much energy it's using now, so that we could clearly see what's happening here. But it appears that you're still using more energy than you did before, and we've got to be reducing the energy usage, not increasing it.
Thank you. Next up is Judy Jacobs. I couldn't hear anything you said. Are you there, Judy? All right, we're going to skip Judy for now and go to Lynn Diggins.
So if I understood in a conversation with Mr. Olenoff, and maybe you can correct me if I'm mischaracterizing, there was some discussion about California not lighting these kinds of intersections at all. Is that something that is just not even under consideration for something like this? That's all. Thank you.
John, I think this is you, John Bishara.
You know, it's not something that we've considered. We find that illuminating interchanges in this area provide a greater driver safety and benefit for you know, for our traveling public. It's not something that was considered, to my knowledge, anyway.
Thank you, John. All right, we're going to start wrapping this up because this is only a presentation to let the MPO know we'll be coming forward sometime soon, probably in the fall, to try to amend this project back into the tip. So we will have another discussion on this at some point. But Kelly Beatty, you have your hand up and we will call on you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to repeat. There was one point I wanted to make that I didn't. I'm sorry. John, it's been some of the crash statistics that you've cited show that this is a high crash area. Obviously, people are getting hurt, poles are getting hurt. It would be more useful to either to show whether crash statistics decrease when you take an existing lighting system like you have now and replace it with a high mass system. Otherwise, there's no context for the crash statistics. But the point I wanted to make from before, and I didn't really get an answer from the lighting folks, is I get that the existing lighting system is inadequate. A new lighting system, if you just use the same poles, would use LEDs. And so my question again is, did you explore replacing the lighting system that you have with modern LED fixtures, which provide more uniformity, better glare control, all those things than what you have now?
This is Todd. No, we did not, because of the holes missing. So we did not explore that.
I'd like to add to that if I could. Thank you, Todd. Kelly, I appreciate the comment. We have found that the lighting system through this area, the existing lighting system through this area is, we've had knockdowns, we've had, significant number of accidents through here, and reusing and installing new Cobra heads is not in the best interest of of the Commonwealth through this location. And we were exploring improvements in the lighting system to illuminate the roadway for improved driver awareness and safety. And the current in place Cobra heads along the corridor are obstacles that get hit frequently and is a maintenance problem for us, and is not providing the lighting and illumination along the corridor that we consider to be safe.
Thank you, John. All right, I'm going to do one more final comment. Steve Olenoff.
Getting back to the reaching out to the people concerned about this, all we've had since the last meeting actually was a one-way communication with them calling us. Rather than get into all of these details, I think they should be meeting with the people concerned here and going over some of these technical details together, because rather than trying to get into all these technical discussions at the MPO meeting. So is that possible that they could actually get out and meet so we could have a two-way conversation with them about this?
Steve, I failed to, I'm sorry, didn't pick up your question. Is it possible for us to meet with these agencies or those that have offered comments? Was that your question?
Right, the people that offered comments. Since the last time all these comments were presented, you sent out a letter explaining some of the things you were doing here and these improvements, which is fine. But that was, until now, we even haven't had an opportunity to get back to you on this, and there's been no opportunity for any two-way conversations on this. So it might be a kind of hearing or just a more informal get together to discuss this with Friends of the Blue Hills, Appalachian Mountain Club, Sierra Club, and the Dark Sky Society, where we could discuss this a little bit more, because there are a lot of unresolved technical issues here.
Okay, Steve, to my knowledge, my team did meet with members as part of our permitting efforts on this project. The response letters that we sent, and I had referenced the International Dark Sky Association, the Appalachian Mountain Club, and Sierra Club, were letters we received and we responded to. But my team did meet with members of the Blue Hills as part of our permitting efforts, and we did conduct, you know, a design public hearing, which allowed an exchange of information, you know, on the specifics of the project. Today, for the, you know, for the MPO, as the chairman noted, we were coming here to give you an update of what's been done on our side, that it's still a project that is, you know, is needed by MassDOT, and we wanted to give you an update of what we've been doing, so that way we can come back in the future to seek funding. I'll go back to my team and make sure that that there are no unresolved loose ends with any of those, with Friends of the Blue Hills or any of the other agencies and comments that we received on the project. There has been, as I said, some meetings in that area, but I'll confirm and come back with some of that information, you know, in the future. But today was more about at least a brief update that we have been working on it. It's a needed project, and we'd like to get some more input from the MPO and get your support in the near future.
Yeah, I was just finding out, unless I'm misunderstanding something, there hasn't been any time, there may be one or two back and forth conversations, but there hasn't been any meeting with the groups as a whole, so that these things could be really discussed with a back and forth conversation.
Thank you, Steve. All right, so as noted, this was just a commercial today. At some point in the future, MassDOT is intending to try to amend this project back into the TIP. When we do that, we will have another discussion, and we will, of course, invite all of the people who have expressed an interest in commenting publicly on this project. Next item on the agenda, I believe, is member items. Are there any? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? Eric Barassa.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, I second that motion.
Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a great week, everybody, or weekend.